So Shiv, in a world of like endless choices that we have these days, how do you think we make decisions that truly matter? Because today, and I think like today we're going to obviously touch on more of like Naval Ravikant's 3 powerful heuristics in decision making to simplify our decision making process, and that allows us to make more fulfilling choice, like to live with more fulfillment and contentment with the choices that we make. But yeah, like how do you? I think like it's better just to start off like with your decision making process in general. How do you make decisions when it comes to like a simple one is like when it comes to like choosing a toothpaste at a shopping center, when you have 10, 15 different ones, like what's like your mental like model, like your heuristics that you use?
What's the consequence of this decision? Probably the main factor. I would say the consequence of the decision I'm going to make. So if I choose this toothpaste, what does this mean for my teeth? And then understanding, does that meet my needs? Just pretty simple. But again, life has more complex decisions that need to be made. But I think consequence is a big one because your decision is ultimately going to impact something in some way. And so understanding what that impact is important.
Which one do you put more emphasis on, like long-term or short-term consequences?
You've got to balance between both. I think. Well, it depends on the type of decision you're making. Long-term definitely is a big part of it, but short-term is just as important. But again, like if you're making economic policy decisions, then you've got to think about long-term. If you're making partner decisions, relationship decisions, that's both short and long-term. And so there's no... How you prioritize it depends on the decision you're trying to make or the outcome you're trying to get from that decision.
Yeah, so I think like based on what you were saying, it's more of like the weight of the importance of the decision that you're making. So if it's something that's like very significant and like something that's very significant, then you'd obviously consider more of like the long term as opposed to making decisions based off gratification or something that's like not as important.
Yeah, I mean, gratification comes in, like, I mean, we're all animals in a way. And we're all seeking some form of dopamine, or we're all seeking some sort of form of a good feel. So sometimes you make reckless decisions that's very short-term driven, and all you can think of is your short-term gratification. But then in the long term, is it the right thing to do? Smoking, for example, is a good indicator of that, right? It's in the long term one of the worst things you could do. In the short term, and how you feel after doing it, you feel good. You feel, well, I don't smoke, but I know people say they rely on nicotine to really lock them in, or it just becomes addictive.
I think it's just like stress relief. Like, is that how they just say it? Like, it's just a reliever.
It's just causing them more stress over time. But yeah,
but
I get what you're saying. I get what you're saying.
That's how they justify it in their minds. Yeah. But in the long term, it's killing them. So yeah, that's right. And I did want to also like explain like what heuristics is, because it's a term that goes around and it's not really well understood or explained. And so heuristics is like more of like a shortcut that you use in your mind for being able to solve complex problems. So it's like being able to quickly make decisions or decide what to choose without having to overthink. And we actually do this on a daily basis. And a good example is like, say you go to the library. When you're trying to find a book, you're gonna first look at what the title of the book is. And so you're gonna go, because the library usually is alphabetical. So then instead of you going through if you're gonna find some book called Think and Grow Rich, you're not gonna go from like the A section, right? And before actually you do that, you're going to go to the nonfiction section. So it already filters out like half the amount of books you would search. And then you go to the letter T. And then from there, you'll look at books. From there, you start searching for Think and Grow Rich. So that's a heuristic. Like you've put in a shortcut of literally simplifying your sampling data size instead of it being like 3,000 books to literally like searching through 300. But you did that without even you having to overthink like, oh, like I have to do this, use this crazy formula or whatever it is. It's just, you did it instinctively. So that's what a heuristic is actually. It's a shortcut that you do. So based on like Naval's one, which was, the first one was like, if you can't decide, the answer is no. And lately I've been using that a lot because I'm just like, there's moments where people try and use fear and like fear of missing out and make you decide on the moment in the situation, especially when it comes to like negotiating. And I think if you can't decide and I feel like when you're doing negotiations and things like that, I think it's very important you give yourself the space and time to really think about it rather than and because in that moment you might be in a dilemma like, oh, I'm not actually getting as much value out of this as opposed to this other person who's like trying to leech off me. So then you should probably give yourself space and time instead of you deciding in that moment where they're trying to use like their emotions or your emotions to really linger you and make the decision to say yes when you're actually probably getting ripped off. So create space and time if you don't know, or just say no. Like if you don't know at all and you don't feel like you've been convinced and persuaded for your own benefit, like it has to be mutualistic, but also your own benefit, then the best answer is no if you can't decide. When you have like friends that say, oh, let's go to like this place and you feel a bit iffy and you're like, oh, I don't know. Like, I don't, I've got other things to do. Then you say no. That's it. I think it saves you from the cost of anxiety costs. They call it actually. It's called anxiety cost, where you keep thinking about it over and over again. You spend days and weeks thinking about it and you make no decision. When you could have saved all that time and just said no. What do you think about that heuristic?
It's an interesting one. Again, I think heuristics, I think we've talked about it before. Heuristics, some heuristics won't apply to every situation, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So I think it's a good frame to think about things or think of a situation like that. I do think though, sometimes you've got to think deeply about what's making you really think a decision. Like saying no could be impulsive. It depends on what it is. But if you, I think, take a step back and understand where your overthinking is coming from or why can't you make a swift decision on this, I think that's just as important as to just saying no. I mean, that's my take on it. But I see I can understand the concept of it, so it makes sense.
Yeah, and that's why I was saying like it's a good point, and that's why I say like the Viktor Frankl quote, which was like just I can't remember off the top of my head, but what I did realize about that quote was like the importance of creating space and time instead of rushing to a decision, instead of being like impulsive, because yeah, you might miss out on opportunities of growth. Because I feel like moments of situation of uncomfort or difficult, like when you feel uncomfortable and fearful, there could be potentially a lot of growth on the other side. So, but at the same time, you could also be ripped off and be jumping off a cliff. So that's why I think it's a really good point you bring up, which is like, just give yourself space and time. You don't have to make a decision in that moment. And no matter whatever psychological tactics they use, oh, like we only have one spot available, or any of those things that they use, you hear a lot from salesmen, or like, this is the only product we have left. Or out of stock, sorry. Like they try and FOMO you in. Just don't rush into it. Really just give yourself space and time. Be like, look, I respect it that you're, all these things, but I just need a bit of time to be able to think about what exactly am I, like based on my situation of this decision that I'm trying to make, because it could be life impacting. People will respect that boundary in space.
And they should.
Yeah, and if they're too pushy, that's a bit suspicious. It's like the bragging razor again.
Yes.
Like if someone's trying to really push it in your face, they're hiding something else in there. Or it's being suspicious.
Something more sinister. What's the second heuristic?
So yeah, the second heuristic is run uphill, in short. So basically, it's like when you're faced with two equal choices, choose the one that's more challenging. And the uphill analogy is like, it's a lot easier to go uphill at the beginning, or it's not easy, but it's better to go uphill in the beginning, and then you have the downhill, which is a lot, because you have momentum then after that. So you do the more difficult and challenging one first, which builds up momentum for later decisions that you make, as opposed to going downhill first, and now you have to climb uphill. And it's like negative. It's not really like, you don't have positive reinforcement or momentum there, because you went downhill, it felt good, you went down the slide, you have to go up the hill. It's just a bit of a drag. So it's just like when you have two equal like equally equal choices, just go for the more challenging one. You'll get more growth, you'll get more momentum, you'll actually give you more confidence for the later decisions you make. So that's what he means. And I think a quote he says, like, which is really nice, which is like, easy choices lead to a hard life, hard choices lead to an easy life.
What's an example of a hard choice?
I think, as you were saying, like the Nikocado Avocado.
Oh yeah.
An example of a hard choice or easy choice? Oh, sorry, did you say
Hard choice.
Hard choice. Well, the hard choice in that situation is just avoiding junk food, right? That's a very difficult decision when you've been doing that for years, and that when your content is based around that. But if you do that, like if you're able to minimize that or control that, or moderate it, and do exercising, all these things, then you'll be a lot more healthier. And it's not just like the physical thing that people see. You'll mentally feel a lot lighter because your body isn't having to. Because food actually affects your way of thinking, and it affects your energy. If you have so much junk food, even I experience it when I have periods of where I just go on a lot of eating a lot of junk food. It affects my the gut, and then that makes me feel like trash. And at the same time, I emit that type of negative energy in the way I conversate and things like that. Whereas when I eat healthy and when I'm in fasting periods, like I'm a lot more sharp and a lot more aware, and it's more positive reinforcement. So yeah, and that can lead to, in the long run, you'll be healthy. You have less health issues. You won't be spending as much money to to basically recovering your health. And you can use that money to then go travel. You can use that money to do other things that you would desire, which improve your life experience. Yeah. And you can do activities like physical activities with your family and friends. You don't feel, you can't, it's not limiting your life basically, and saves you time from spending excessive amounts of time in the hospital, whereas places you want to go to. Whereas the easy choice would have been just eating junk food all day, every day, and doing content around that. And then the hard life, which is that you'd be having all the struggles that I talked about.
Yeah, no, Nikocado Avocado is a pretty interesting one because I think a lot of people gave him a lot of flack for transforming himself into a very large person, but then he's lost, in pounds, he's lost 250 pounds. In kilos, I think that'd be about 100.
Wow, that's insane. That's like David Goggins.
14 kilos. Like losing 114 kilos.
In the span of 7 months, by the way. I think it was
longer.
Yeah, true.
The reason I say that is because he said he had content. He actually recorded all his content, and then he started his weight loss journey. So all the stuff that he's uploaded recently before yesterday's video was actually stuff that he recorded prior. It wasn't like exactly 7 months ago. So he was like he had a backlog of a lot of content.
Yeah, well, that is true. That makes sense because 7 months to achieve that. I don't think
you can't. That's what 120 kilos, close to 120 kilos in 7 months. Yeah,
it's probably like a 1.5 year or like 2 year journey.
2 years.
Yeah.
2 years.
Well, like the other thing people don't think about is like there's also like the mental processing and just getting the routine right as well. Like that's part of the journey.
That's insane how much weight he lost.
But yeah, that's incredible. Good on him, honestly. I think and just seeing his latest video, I saw like a snippet of it. He looks a lot healthier. Like he's talking in a positive manner. He's more self-aware, and I think he was self-aware the entire time, but he's able to talk about it more confidently, and it makes a lot of change. Like people just think, oh, it's like the exterior, like the physical, but it completely it changes your character because you have to go through discipline. Like the thing that we always talk about, like being attached to the character, like you had to have discipline, and you had to. It's not easy choices you make on a daily basis, like trying to minimize your intake of what you usually have and trying to renew those habits. It's difficult. So it requires discipline and a lot of other things as well, motivation and so on and so forth.
That's a good example of making hard choices. But yeah, he calls it a sociological experiment though. So did he have it lined up? Did he have it all planned out to have it do it that way? Who knows?
Yeah, maybe.
Regardless, he got controversy and then he changed it around.
I mean, if it was really planned out, it's a smart tactic, but very life-threatening.
Yes.
Got him the attention, but yeah.
Very life-threatening. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. You're risking a heart attack for the sake of views.
But yeah, I think like that's the thing. And I think we talked about this a long time back where it's like our brain has a tendency to always avoid immediate pain. Like as much as possible, we try and minimize and we try and hide it under like these unhealthy habits or unhealthy addictions, which is like either it's drugs or just playing video games or eating junk food unnecessarily and things like that. We justify it, but really we're just trying to avoid pain of what we have to go through anyways. We're trading like the short-term pain for long-term loss, basically, because when you keep those it's not bad to play video games, but it's like if you're addicted to it, that's when it affects your quality of time. You don't spend time with other people and things like that, and yeah, it negatively affects you essentially. So that's basically the second heuristic. Yeah.
What's the third one?
The third one is prioritize time over money.
Okay.
So in this one, it's just like how he's saying like value time over financial gains, because at the end of the day, money is infinite. Like nowadays, we can print as much money as we want. You know, it's the value of money isn't as what it was 100 years ago. But to say that is that time is finite. Like you can, this time that we have now, I can't get it back. I can't pay with money. There's no time machine or anything like that exists. And even if that did exist, it would change the outcome, change the future outcome. So it's almost like time is finite. You can never get that back. Whereas money can always be earned and spent repeatedly. And focusing on time can lead to more achievements, and just more of a fulfilling life. Exactly, being present, more mindful in things like that. And stories of people making life changes is through like valuing the time and consider. I think like that's one of the biggest factors. And I was talking this with my friend today, which is like there's 3 components that we always are actually thinking in the back of our mind when we're making decisions. So it's like a trilemma, and the top one is like time. Then you have family or either money. And some people might be more skewed to time and money, especially in our ages, as opposed to time and family, because they have family, like their own family yet. But when you're in your 30s or much older, you might have time and family more focused as opposed to money, because you already have money. So we're always considering those 3 things, but time is the one that dictates that, because at the end of the day, if you have more time, you can make more time for your family. You can make more connections with your family and spend more time, or you can make more time you have more time to make more money. So time is always the biggest important factor.
Sorry about that. Yeah, dramatic. No, that does make sense. I think I saw this on YouTube, but I think it was Hamish and Andy. I think they interviewed Richard Branson. Have you seen?
I haven't seen it, but it's just like that name just brought so many memories back in the time. Yeah,
they interviewed Sir Richard Branson, and they're like, "How does it feel to be like a 68-year-old billionaire?" And I think his response was, "I'd rather be 22 and broke." And they were like a bit surprised, like, why would you rather be that? He's like, because you have time. Like you're still in your youth, you have the time, and it's actually quite powerful when you think about it that way. Like, I think the culture that's been shown now is the grind culture, but it's not really grind culture. Like, as I said, we're quick to see everyone's successes, and we see like, all these millionaires in their 30s and 40s, and you want to replicate that in your 20s, which is possible, but it's not possible for everyone. So I do think we also spend a lot of time stressing and worrying about things. There's a finite amount of time, but it's about how you use that time as well. Like, are you actually using it to be productive and doing better for yourself, for society, for the world, people around you? Or are you using that time to stress and put unnecessary pressure on yourself?
Yeah, wow. Like I've seen a lot of actually videos of like billionaires and millionaires, especially like I don't know if you've heard about School of Hard Knocks. Like there's this kid, well, it's not a kid, he's like 22-year-old.
He walks around asking questions.
Have
you ever been broke?
Yeah, that guy. I got to give it to him for his like persistence and like confidence to be able to do that.
He's actually really good. It's good to see his insights from him.
Yeah, I like it. I really enjoy his videos, and a lot of the ones that he interviewed for like billionaires, so like in the 50s or 60s, probably. I haven't really seen 40-year-olds as much, but they always say time. They're like, oh, would you give back all your wealth to go back in time, like to be like at the age of 20? They'll say yes, all the time, always.
Yeah.
And this is other interview that I did see of this like Aussie. He's just like to people, you could get $1 million tomorrow, but you'd have to give up. I think I'm not wording it properly, but it's just like you get $1 million, but you won't live tomorrow. Would you take it? And the guy said no. And then he's just like, yeah, that's right. You're worth more than $1 million. Your life is worth more than $1 million.
Yeah, I remember. I've seen that.
Yeah,
it's like a young guy as well.
Yeah, young Aussie guy, and
with
I'm
the mullet as well.
Yeah, the mullet, typical Aussie.
That was actually really like
I was
powerful the way he said that.
Yeah,
that was really deep. But yeah, I remember that. He's like, your life is worth a lot more than that.
And that's the thing. Your life in time is worth more than all of these things. Like a lot of these things that we place value and we stress over. Like we're stressing over like money and all these other things, but really it's just that the amount of time you spend to stress about it, it could be also used to do something productive instead of anxiety costs again.
And there comes a point where you're gonna die. Everything you have, like
I wouldn't want it either.
Yeah,
no, you're right. Yeah,
like you just like everything you work for, everything you do, just stays.
Yeah, because
like what do you take with you? You know, you don't get buried with your wealth. You don't get cremated with your wealth. Like, it's fascinating, right? Humans are like so great. Like when it comes to greed and all these negative types of personalities, when it comes to money and status and power, and like, what is it all for? It's for that finite amount of time. But is that finite time a good use of your time? I don't think people actually answer that question really well. Are you making the most out of your time right now? You know, or are you always chasing for the next thing? I mean, how many people end up wasting their lives? Drug addicts, and for whatever reason, they become addicted to drugs. They become a slave to their own mind. They never have control over their lives. How many people live lives like that? You know? I mean, there's a lot of circumstances that lead to that. So I'm not judging based on that. I'm just simply saying that from an outside perspective, how many people actually live that life where they're actually the most productive type? You know, there's a few people that don't, sadly, for whatever reason. But there's always a story behind people that are able to turn around and actually make use of their time so well. And those success stories are like hyper successful. Like they actually stand out really well. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I get what you're saying. Yeah, completely.